Is the Milky Way a grand design spiral?
Not really. It's messier than that. It has bits and pieces of spiral arms. So it has two main spiral arms, but there's lots of other little bits and pieces. So it wouldn't, if you were outside the Milky Way, it wouldn't look anywhere near as pretty as that.
What's life like in the arms compared to life in the quiet neighbourhoods of a galaxy? Is life in the arms more interesting?
It's where all the star formation is happening, because it's where all this gas is getting squeezed together. So it's where the massive young stars are forming. And remember, because very massive stars have very short lifetimes, it's also where they blow up as supernovae. So I guess it's a slightly unhealthy place to be, because you might find yourself rather close to an exploding star. But it's sort of where all the action is. It's where stars are forming, where young stars are exploding.
The Milky Way has arms.
It does.
How many arms does it have?
2 or 3.
We're not in the arm?
We're sort of in a little spur of an arm. So there is an arm relatively close to us, but actually we're not in an arm ourselves.
Are we on the way in or on the way out of an arm?
I think we're upstream of an arm, so I think we're not going to encounter an arm for some time.
So the companion is what stopped us from having that first diagram you showed me, the concentric circles.
Yes, it's what stirs the whole thing up and creates the spiral structure in the first place. I mean, there are galaxies that have no spiral structure at all. They tend to be things, the reason they don't have a spiral structure is because they don't have any gas in it, so there's no gas to form stars, so there's nothing to light up in the same fashion. There are galaxies that have what's referred to as flocculant spiral arms, so just lots and lots of little tiny bits of spiral arms, so they haven't produced that kind of grand design effect. So there is the full range of things, from these massive grand design to rather rattier spiral arms like the Milky Way, to almost no spiral arms, to no spiral arms at all.
And what does a no spiral arm look like? Is it spherical or disc-like?
You can have a disc-like galaxy. It's a thing called an S0 galaxy. It's a disc-like galaxy with no spiral structure, really largely because there's no gas to respond in the dramatic way that the gas responds in a galaxy like M51.
Where does the other famous galaxy that I always think of is Andromeda? Where does Andromeda fall into this spectrum between ratty and grand design?
It's actually a little hard to tell, because Andromeda is sufficiently close to Edge On that you really can't see its spiral structure particularly well. But it's probably quite similar to the Milky Way in being somewhere in between the completely ratty, ugly-looking galaxies and the beautiful grand design galaxies.
I know it's Edge On, but you can analyse it in so many ways and look through it and do all these redshifts. You still don't know what Andromeda looks like from above.
No. Not really. I mean, as you say, you can kind of infer things looking at the orbits and so on, and you can see that everything clearly isn't just going around on circular orbits, so we know there's some spiral structure there. But using that information, you really can't reconstruct what it would look like if it were viewed from the top.
And you don't know what the Milky Way looks like from the top?
Sadly not, no.
You can't just map every star and then...
We're working on that. So there's a satellite up there called Gaia at the moment, which is indeed mapping the locations of 1 billion stars in the Milky Way. When it's finished its work, we probably will have a much better idea of what the Milky Way would look like from outside. It's still hard, because you don't make measurements with infinite precision, because actually it's very hard. If you look through the middle of the galaxy, there's so much obscuration that actually you can't see the far side of the galaxy at all. So there's bits we're not going to be able to see just because we're stuck in the Milky Way, even with Gaia, but we will have at least a much better map of most of the galaxy. Yeah, so actually the other thing that M51's famous for is it was the first galaxy in which spiral structure was really identified. And this is a sketch made by Lord Rosse in the middle of the 19th century from his observations with his enormous Leviathan telescope. And it really doesn't look, he did a pretty good job of actually showing what the galaxy actually looks like. Yeah, so it was his work that got people thinking about spiral structure in the first place, because he was the first person to really identify that it was there in what were then called spiral nebulae. And it was fascinating because, of course, at that time they had no idea what they were, right? So actually there was a big debate: is this a solar system in the middle of forming, relatively nearby, or is this something in the vast reaches of space? So there was a big argument about whether objects like this could actually all be resolved into stars, or whether it really was just smooth gaseous material.
Got up to a few other adventures on the way. I'm guessing that this here is representing the Earth.
Correct.
And this golden orb here in the middle is the Sun.
Yes, it is, yes.
And here, it's interesting though, I mean, Venus is about the same size as the Earth, but we have here a tiny little dot, which will be the planet Venus. And presumably it's going to sweep across the face of the Sun, as far as the people on Earth are concerned,